Hello and welcome back to my channel. So today's video is going to be all about the mysterious death of King Ludwig II of Bavaria. Ludwig was born on the 25th of August 1845 and he was a son of King Maximilian II of Bavaria. He became king on the 10th of March 1864 at the age of 18. So during his reign the Unification of Germany happened, and that was where Bavaria and 21 other kingdoms became part of the new German Empire, with the King of Prussia, Wilhelm I, as the emperor. Now, Ludwig didn't really support this, but Bavaria did manage to retain a large degree of autonomy in the empire. So as his reign went on, Ludwig started to withdraw from the day-to-day state affairs of running the country and instead started concentrating on extravagant artistic and architectural projects. He commissioned Neuschwanstein Castle, which was actually the inspiration for the castle in Disney's Sleeping Beauty, and he also commissioned Lindenhof Palace and Herrenchiemsee. And he was also the patron of the composer Richard Wagner. Now, Ludwig did actually spend his own private royal revenues on all these palaces and artistic ventures, so he wasn't actually using the state's money for it. But to fund the palaces, he was actually borrowing money off of people, and when his ministers tried to stop him from borrowing so much money, he did resist them. And by 1885, Ludwig had ran up massive debt. So Ludwig's ministers started to doubt his ability to rule, mainly because of his mismanagement of money, but also because Ludwig's attempts to get more money for his projects were crossing the line into criminal conduct. So Ludwig's uncle Leopold, who was actually his heir, and Ludwig's ministers decided that his reign should come to an end. And the only way they could do this was by declaring him insane and therefore unfit to rule. So they asked Dr. Bernhard von Gudden, who was Germany's most prominent psychiatry professor, to make the diagnosis. Ludwig's ministers did actually collect a lot of paper evidence of Ludwig being insane, but Dr. Gudden never actually met Ludwig in his diagnosis process. So on the 8th of June 1886, Dr. Gudden diagnosed Ludwig with chronic paranoia that interfered with his ability to rule. Leopold became regent and ordered Ludwig's arrest and confinement for medical treatment. So on the 12th of June 1886, Ludwig was arrested and taken to Castle Berg. To prevent him from escaping the castle, the door handles were taken off of his doors and also his windows were barred. The nearby town of Berg was actually put under martial law and the people of the town were forbidden to leave their houses after dark. So Dr. Gudden had gone with him to Castleberg to do Ludwig's treatment, and he devised a treatment plan of rest, social contact and regular exercise. So Ludwig seemed okay with this treatment plan and he was cooperative with it. On the morning of the 13th of June, Ludwig and Dr. Gudden went for a walk around the castle grounds and down to the shore of Lake Starnberg. A male nurse went with them just in case he was needed for any reason. Later that evening they went out for another walk, but this time Dr. Gudden told the male nurse that he did not have to come with them. So Dr. Gudden and Ludwig went off on their walk, but they did not return by the time that they were meant to, so people became worried. A search party was organised and at 10:30 p.m. they found Ludwig's overcoat and umbrella on a path by the lake. They then found both Ludwig's and Dr. Gudden's hats by the water. Worried that the king and the doctor were both in the water, another doctor and a castle steward went to the nearby village of Berg to see if they could find a fisherman who would be able to take them out in his boat on the lake to look for them. Around 20 to 25 paces from the shoreline, they found Ludwig and Dr. Gooden floating in the water, face down, both dead. They pulled both men onto the fisherman's boat and they headed back to shore, while the doctor who was on the boat started to do artificial resuscitation on Ludwig, but he pronounced both men dead at 11:35 p.m. So an autopsy was performed on Ludwig, but this did not reveal his cause of death. The only injury Ludwig had was a scrape on his knees, but he had no other injuries, and his lungs were not full of water as you would expect them to if he had drowned. No autopsy was performed on Dr. Gooden, but it was noticed that he did have a lump above his right eye and scratches on his nose. Part of one of Dr. Gooden's fingernails was missing, and this was later found in Ludwig's coat. It was concluded that both men had had a fight, but why did they have this fight and how did they both end up dead? Now, the police did not cordon off the site of their deaths, so the general public was able to come and have a look round. And the general public did come and have a look round, just seeing if they could find any clues as to what happened, and quite a few people came up with their own ideas that were nothing like each other on what could have happened to the king and the doctor. But the government's official line was suicide, homicide. They think that Ludwig actually wanted to commit suicide, so while he was out for the walk with Dr. Gooden, he ran away with him towards the water to go and drown himself, and that Dr. Gooden had raced after him. There'd been a struggle or a fight over this, with the king killing Dr. Gooden and then the king going into the water to drown himself. But the autopsy showed that there was no water on Ludwig's lungs, which there should have been, unless Ludwig actually died from a rare form of drowning called dry drowning, where a laryngeal spasm suffocates the victim without any aspiration of water. Now, accidental death was given as maybe another reason, where maybe both men just happened to suffer a heart attack when they entered the water, or that if they did have a fight, they could have both fainted or been knocked unconscious or something and fallen into the water and ended up drowning that way. Another theory was that Dr. Gooden actually carried chloroform on him to use on the king if the king needed to be sedated. And it is possible that Dr. Gooden did use this on the king, but he ended up poisoning the king with it instead, and the king dying, and then Dr. Gooden committing suicide because of this. There was actually a witness that said that Ludwig's body actually did smell of ether. Another theory is that they were both murdered by a third party. Ludwig had fallen victim to political intrigue, and then Dr. Gooden had been killed off as a witness. Now, two men who recovered the bodies that night both said that the king had been shot. One was the fisherman who had helped find the bodies. He said that he had been waiting on his boat to help the king escape, and then while the king was climbing aboard his boat, he had been shot in the back and fallen back into the water, and so the fisherman had gone and left him and then later come back with the search party. Now, he had written this in his diary, and his diary actually disappeared, but luckily he was able to tear the bit about him, the king being shot, out of his diary and giving it to a historian. The other man was one of the doctors who had examined Ludwig's body, and he told his daughter on his deathbed that Ludwig had been shot and the drowning story was just a cover-up. The men's death could also have been manslaughter. Now, while the king was at Castleberg, the castle was being protected by armed guardsmen, and the armed guardsmen could have seen Ludwig and the doctor fighting and mistook them for intruders and so shot them. And then this was covered up by the Bavarian government. But if it was true that they were shot, it would also mean that the doctors performing the autopsy falsified the results. Now, if they were going to falsify the results, then why didn't they just say that they found water in the king's lungs? So this would back up the story that he committed suicide by drowning. Why, if you was going to cover up a murder, would you say that you could find no cause of death? So that's what all the theories are of what might have happened to King Ludwig II of Bavaria, and we can speculate all we want about what happened to him, but in the end we will never know what actually happened that night. So that was the mysterious death of King Ludwig II of Bavaria. What do you think happened to him? How do you think he could have died? What theory would be the most plausible to you? Let me know below if you want to. And I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye.